My name is Robert Caverly, and I'm a professor at Villanova University. Villanova University is about 12 miles, about 18 kilometers outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Villanova, and I've been there since 1997. And before that, I was at another university in Massachusetts for about 14 and a half years. So I've been a professor since 1983, which is almost 34 years.
Okay. My first question is, we're here in the suburb of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. How is it to live in a swing state?
How is it to live in a swing state? We get a lot of special attention during elections because being a swing state. Pennsylvania is kind of interesting because it has two large cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, which are strongly Democratic, and the suburbs are sort of a mix, and the rural areas are leaning more towards the Republican side. So and there's about equal numbers. So as a swing state, it's also a close state in terms of that. So you see an interesting mix of signs and have an interesting mix of conversations with people.
How do you feel about the election system and like the battlegrounds who decide which candidate will win?
I think the election system, I think, is a good one. I think the problem is it goes on too long because as soon as the elections are over, people start campaigning like the next day for the next election. But I think the election system is a good one. It has some issues. For example, if you're not, both the Democratic and Republican parties both have their national parties, and they push one candidate or another, and it doesn't leave room for new candidates to come in. Let me rephrase that. New candidates come in, but they're pushing against a particular other candidate. And I think an example of that was Bernie Sanders. He was not part of that Democratic Party and at least mechanism, but he did very well. And for some extent, Trump was the same way. He was the same way.
You work as a professor for Villanova University. What feelings do you have about the educational system in the U.S.?
I think the educational system in the U.S. is very, very good. It's got many different levels. You have your extremely high-level institutions like MIT and Harvard and Caltech, and those get the highest and the best students. It's very accessible, so that even down to the community college level, people who may not be ready for four-year college when they get out of high school, or people who've maybe gone to work after high school and then want to come back into college, or people that may want to start a little slower and then go to a four-year school for the last 2 years. So I think it's very accessible, and it has many different layers for entry into it. There's also a lot of different emphasis for various universities. Some are very research-oriented, some are very education-oriented, meaning they don't have graduate programs, and there's some that are in between. So I think that's a good mix too, that a student, when they're looking for a school, can sort of, if they're interested in doing research in addition to the education, there's that. If they're just interested in getting a good undergraduate education but not doing research, there's that. and there's a wide gamut in between. So I think it's a good system.
But what about the downside?
It's
Like
expensive.
regarding,
It's,
student debt?
yes, it's expensive. It's I know in some countries like Germany, it's not exactly free, but it's almost free. And in the U.S., you could amass quite a bit of debt going to college. And that's probably the biggest limiting factor. I said it was open from community college all the way up to research. That's probably the limiting factor for some of the higher tier schools is their expense. The nice thing about the community college system is it is very reasonable in cost. And a lot of people are actually doing 2-year community and then transferring to 4-year to finish the last 2 years as a way to prevent the debt load from getting too high. So that's probably the downside, is the expense.
So is it still a fair system for most Americans?
What do you mean by fair?
Is it like it's accessible, like, but if you're not at the top university, you might not get a well-paid job.
There's been a lot of studies that have shown that there are a few schools where the school and the name mean things, but it's more the college degree, regardless of which of the institution is. So in that respect, it's the fact that you've got the 4-year college degree that means something. The big schools like the Yales and the MITs and the Harvards, they're so well recognized but also they're very exclusive. But having the college degree is really the key.
What about yesterday at dinner? We talked about some jobs where it's necessary to have a higher education degree, but at the end they're not really well paid. As an engineer, like my father, like you can somehow come up with the money for your debts, right?
Yes, engineering is what's the return on investment? I think it's, and you can your salary is usually good enough that the debt load is yeah. But on the other hand, if there are low-paying jobs, and then the debt is tough to deal with, yeah.
So how do you think maybe the system should change, or are there any candidates? Like, I'm pretty sure both candidates right now are not really touching much of the problem, or
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the Clinton Kane campaign is trying to push for free education. The community college system is not free, but it's reasonably low cost. So that would be something that would work. There are some debt forgiveness programs. I told you students come out with a lot of debt, student loans. There are some debt forgiveness programs, like if you work for a government for a number of years, that government service, well, you're working for the government, but the time in government that can shave off some of the debt. I know in medicine, if you go to underserved areas, that helps there's programs to shave off the debt. But those are special conditions, and for doing that. If you don't have one of those, you're pretty much have to pay everything off. There are programs too. I think sort of the starting point, I'm not 100% sure of this, but it seems that there's a starting point of a 10-year payback period, but there are ways you could extend that a little bit. You can't do it yourself, you have to apply for it and that kind of thing, but I think there are ways to extend the period of time.
so in 10 years you have to maybe, how much is the cost in Villanova? Like
well, Villanova is one of the most is a private school, and it's one of the more expensive schools. It's about 50,000 euros a year, but that includes tuition, room, board, books, everything. It's about 50,000 euros a year. Most other universities that are public are state universities, and tuition, room, and board, it really depends on what part of the country you're in. I think Penn State is probably around 20,000 euros a year, roughly. And a lot of times people will not borrow the entire sum. They'll have family and so forth that'll come up with part of it, but some of it's financed. And some of the numbers I've heard are student loans. People come out with student loans on the order of about 30,000 euros after 4 years. So they'll pay part of their tuition, when it occurs, and they'll work in the summer and make money. But that's kind of the average I've heard is about 30,000 euros for the 4 years. And so that's got to be paid off in 10 years, and it's 3,000 euros a year for 10 years plus whatever the interest is. So if you have a good paying job, it's not so bad. If you have a low paying job, it can be a problem.
How do you see spending, like the university is spending a lot of money into sports like that?
Villanova has a sports program. As a matter of fact, if you follow college basketball, they won the national championship last year. Villanova, I think, has got a pretty good balance of that. There was a number of years ago that, the NCAA, which is the National Collegiate Sports Association, I forget the exact acronym, but if you wanted to be in Division I, that's the top division, which we are in basketball, Villanova's in basketball. If you wanted to be in football, you had to have a football stadium that's got so many seats, you have to have so many scholarships. And there was a study done at Villanova over a number of years, and they pretty much decided they can't do that. Okay, we didn't have the room. I think some of the reasons were we didn't have the room to expand the stadium and so forth. So I think the balance at Villanova is pretty good. One thing to note is that Villanova's got one of the highest graduation rates of basketball players in the country. I think within the last couple of years, it's like all of them have graduated, which in the NCAA they're one of the top schools. At other schools and universities, it's sort of good sports teams generate a lot of loyalty to the school, okay, but there are problems with the amount of money that goes into it. A lot of times it comes through alumni who provide money, but I really don't know from other schools how the money gets apportioned. But I do know one of the positive aspects is it generates a lot of loyalty to the school, which is long lasting, not just for the 4 years the students are there, but the alumni will be associated with that for years and years to come. Which, by the way, also happens at Villanova. We have some very strong alumni.
That's a big money thing, right? Also, like alumni, the university gets a lot of. In Germany, normally, almost no one spends money or gives money to universities after they graduate. But in the US, it's something different, right?
Yes, yes. Education is expensive, and a lot of times there is a lot of wealthy, and sometimes not so wealthy alumni who do provide donations to the university, and those are used for new buildings and or scholarships or to help fund research and educational programs. So Villanova's and other private schools are probably more donation-oriented for endowment than public schools, but that doesn't mean public schools aren't out there, talking to their alumni.
So the thing I do, or we do, at the end of an interview, normally we ask different questions to each person we interview, but at the end we always ask one particular question.
Okay.
What is your forecast for the election, and why or maybe a problem or whatever?
That's a good question. I've been very interested in this election for a while. Personally, I'm a Democrat, but I've been fascinated by of what's happened in the Republicans, which I really paid more attention to, because there were very well-established Republican candidates. Bush being the strongest one because of the family legacy. And he was eliminated pretty early on, and that to me was fascinating to see that, which kind of is and then of course the other ones were eliminated as well and wound up with Trump, and then the Democrats had Bernie Sanders, who was making a real strong play. That says something to me about people wanting change. Okay. People, especially after the recession, some people call it a mini depression of 2008, there's been a lot of people that are hurting and still hurting, and so I think people want change. And so that's why I think Trump has a lot of support, is he represents something different, not status quo. And the same with Bernie Sanders. He represented not the status quo. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, has been in the public eye nationally since about 1990 or 91. So she's definitely status quo. But on the other hand, she's got a lot of experience, having been a senator, secretary of state, and of course her husband was president for 8 years. So her downside is that we had a nice breeze come by here, so gonna have to take a pause. She's sort of status quo, or the previous guard, or however you want to put it. So, and I think that's why she's got some negatives. People want change, but she's sort of status quo. I personally, I don't know if you've heard the word policy wonk before. No. A policy wonk is somebody who's just very much into policy, and she's very much into policy, and I think that's to her advantage. And the other candidates, they're not policy wonks, they're whatever they are, but she's really into policy, so I think that's one of her strengths. So the question was my forecast. This one's hard to imagine. I mean, hard to think about. But I think she will come out in the end as the winner. By how much, I have no idea. The polls are all over the place. Having read a little bit about the polls, it depends on who's asking the question, who the question's asked to. And we have a breeze coming in here again. Who the question's asked to, what is the makeup of the cohort, whether it leans Democrat, leans Republican, that skews the poll too. So it's very difficult to look at the polls to figure out what the true sense of the country is. But I think, in my mind, I think Hillary Clinton is going to win the day, so to speak.